Welcome. You have found the show we call Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? This is a podcast for men. And on this show, we will hear real-life stories from men about how they have navigated the complexities of being a man in this modern day. We are going to look at the boys don't cry way of thinking and how that has influenced them and how they have risen above societal pressures to be true to themselves. The focus of this show is men's real-world experiences, not just ideas and theories. I hope that you will learn from what they have discovered and use it in your life as well. Let's get into today's show. Okay, everyone, thanks for being here. Another episode of Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? This guest, god damn, I love his story. His story is so fucking cool. And where he's at today versus, is it 3 years? Maybe 3 years ago we met?
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. This is Jason White, everyone. Thanks for being here, man. I'm super stoked you had the time to do this.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's I saw the name of it and I was like, yeah, this podcast has been needed.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you asked me, to be honest. It's cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, your story is just, I fucking love it. Like, I actually refer to your journey a lot when I'm talking to other guys.
Yeah.
Before we hit record, I kind of explained what I think of your journey and how cool it is. But why don't you just tell everybody who you are, what you do, where you are, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Jason, and I'm originally from Louisiana. And, I was raised in a very Southern evangelical conservative home. My great-grandmother raised me for a while, and she was like the oldest living member of the church we grew up in forever. So that was kind of the background, the upbringing. I got married at a young age. I say young age, I was 26, but like in the evangelical world, like that was one of your goals in life, was to get married, to find a good Christian woman and have kids and all this. And it was good. Growing up, my brother was a musician, a singer, and he was like a prodigy. He sat down at 6 years old, started playing the keyboard and picked up the guitar, and just good. And so I always had that influence around. So I started singing at a young age, did church stuff, do like talent shows here and there. And then in college, did some talent shows and some open mics. But I always wanted to get serious about it, but never really pulled that trigger. Thought maybe someday I could do something with this. Got married. The wife was not a big fan of the music when we were dating. She seemed to be, but once we got married, I think it was an issue of like, well, I don't want you going out to these bars and singing and these other women and all this kind of stuff. And it was didn't matter how much I tried to reassure her. So I just stopped. I just stopped singing altogether. Kind of just put that dream. I buried that dream. I like, it was, it was dead. Like there was no resurrecting that dream at all. It was like, all right. Eventually, I even like sold all my guitars. Like we got married, I had 3. Then it was 2. Then it was 1. Then it was none. And that was just kind of the life that we lived, and traveled for work, and always chasing something. Didn't know what. Then in 2018, I believe it was, end of 2017, 2018, I got into men's work, got into meditation, I started really challenging my own faith. It's kind of a cliche word, but it was like a deconstruction of that faith for me. And that was very pivotal on all of this. But through that process, I found a group called the Samurai Brotherhood, which was a brotherhood of men based largely out of Canada. But they had online groups and squads, they called them, called Ronin. And I joined that. And that is now called Arca Brotherhood. And that's where I met you, is through the guy that led my group, Simon. And you and I kind of messaged back and forth quite a bit. We talked, and we get on calls and about different things. Fast forward 2020. Actually, what's today? Dude, no way. Tomorrow will be 3 years since my ex-wife walked out.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so...
To the day?
To the day. November 30th, 2020. She went to work. While she was at work, I called a number. We shared an iTunes account. And what happens, sometimes they show us each other who called and all this kind of stuff on our phone. I saw a number I didn't recognize. I knew I didn't call it. And I'd seen that number probably like 3 weeks before, and I questioned my wife about it. She was like, "Oh, that's my sister's new number." And then it showed up
Mm.
again, but it wasn't saved under her sister's name. So I Googled it, and before it even came up, I knew whose number it was. And I was like, "Oh, shit." I asked her about it via text, and her exact words were, "I'm fucked up. This is fucked up. I'm sorry. We need help." And I was like, "Okay, let's talk about it." And she was like, "I'm going to come home. We're going to talk about it." She never came home that night. And she told me later that night that she wanted a divorce and she was done. And this was blindsided. I mean, like one of the main reasons I got into men's work and into meditation was in an attempt to save my marriage, to figure out how I can be a better man, a better person. And I realize now, like, there's nothing I could have done that would save the marriage, because it takes two people wanting and working and striving for that. And so the marriage was over. I was divorced less than 3 months later, which was crazy to me. I have two kids involved. And so we went through all that. We figured all that stuff out. And man, I was, even with meditation, like meditation was my thing. Like, that's what got me through. So it says,
Mm.
real men don't cry, or do they? Um, that is one of the biggest things that helped. I would sit in my meditation and I would just weep. I would close my door, I'd go in there and I would just weep. And I would allow my body to process every emotion that wanted to come its way, whether that be
Yeah.
fear, anger, sadness, depression, whatever that was. And I would just allow that to pass through my body. And there'd be times where I'd be bawling, there'd be times where I'd be screaming, there'd be times where I'd be punching a pillow, like just letting it all out and journaling through that. And then fast forward through that, and I was divorced in March. The last week of May 29th, my sister died. She died of cancer. She had been battling cancer for about 4 years. And I think right after that, I was just like, I didn't know what I was doing, and I just needed some direction. And so I talked to you, and I said, "Man," I said, "let's do this coaching thing." And so we did the 6 weeks, the 6 or 8 weeks with you. And in the process of that, some things came up. Like before my sister passed, she was like, "I wish you would sing again," because we all got together
Mm.
for Easter in March of 2021, and it was the first time that me and my sister and my brother and my mom had been together in like 16 years or something like that. And my brother brought his guitar and we're all playing, and she goes, "Why don't you sing anymore, brother?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You never sing. Like, what is that?" I was like, "Well, I mean, you you grab your guitar off the wall and it immediately becomes a fight. You kind of lose the drive and the passion for it. Then you start your guitar. Like, it just kind of got beat out of me, you know?" And she was like, "Well, I really wish you'd sing some more. Let's sing again." I said, "All right, maybe so." And so sure enough, my sister died, and I came back from her funeral. Actually, we had already started. I think we had already
Yeah.
started. I think we started in April or May. But I came back from her funeral, and you were like, "Man," because one of my guys in my squad was like, "Dude," he just heard me riffing one night while we were waiting. He's like, "I challenge you to post a video of you singing on Facebook." And I was like, "Oh gosh," and you don't want to let those guys down. When they put a challenge, they mean it. And so I just put a real quick little clip of me doing a little Tennessee whiskey on there. It was awful because I didn't have a guitar. It was a little out of key when I got started. But anyways, so I posted that. Nothing come of it really. You saw it and you're like, "What is that? What is this?" And I was like, it's just something I used to do, like. So anyways, I come back, and a week after, like right after I get back, immediately I fly in from the airport. I have to pick my daughters up and have them for like an extended period of time. And I'm just exhausted emotionally, physically. Like, my sister died. It was rough. I didn't even get to stay for her funeral, like for the burial. I just was at the funeral and had to leave. And my next door neighbor, he's like, "Hey man, why don't you come to this open mic?" And he'd been inviting me for like 2 years. And I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "Dude, I know you've had a rough week," because I told him everything. We were friends. He said, "Come, it's my birthday. We'll have a beer and we'll sing some songs." And it was on a Friday. And I said, "Wait, this coming Friday is your birthday?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "How old you gonna be, man?" He said, "I'll be 44." What he didn't know is he invited me to come to his 44th birthday. That same day would have been my sister's 44th birthday that just passed.
Oh, damn.
And I was just like, that's too much coincidence. Like, this person that had been asking me to go back to playing music and doing music and following this dream or whatever you want to call it, then on her birthday I get invited to go sing. And so I go and I do her favorite song, which is The River by Garth Brooks. I do it a cappella, no guitar, nothing. I don't own a guitar. I don't even know how to play the song. And that night I got offered my first ever gig, like full gig. This lady, the owner was like, "Hey, I want you to do 2.5 hours of country music." I said, "Man, we got two problems. I don't own a guitar and I've never played music that long." She goes, "Figure it out, sweetie, and let me know when you're ready." I said, "Okay." Next day, my neighbor knocks on the door. He said, "Hey, so-and-so last night heard you didn't have a guitar." And he pulls a guitar from behind his back and he said, "You can borrow this one." I was like, "What is going on?"
Well, this was all happening when we were working together too.
Yeah.
So
And so I get on there and I'm like, "Dude, what does this mean?" You were like, "I think you got to see what's going with this." And so I start learning. And at the time, like I was trying to do the men's coaching, as you know, and I love men's work. I love helping men, but I never could get it off the ground. It's just, I mean, you can attest to how difficult it is to get any sort of following, any sort of traction, and then getting men to commit. It's a hard road to hoe. And and you were like, "Man, like I think you're really good at coaching, but I think you're really good at this music thing. You need to really think about it." And so as we went on the next few weeks, it kept coming up, and you're like, "Look, do me a favor, give it a shot, give it 6 months, and if it's not there, then back away. Then you know this isn't for you." And I was like, "All right, fine, Brandon, fine." And at the end of 6 months, I was gigging every weekend that I didn't have my kids. Now here I am, 2.5 years later, and and it's just been incredible. Like I got invited to Nashville. I went to Nashville in August. I did 2 writers rounds. There's a producer in Nashville that has my music right now that's listened to it. There's 2 more producers that are like, "Hey, if you get like a professional demo done, send it to me. I want to hear it." Um, and this is, I don't know any way to describe it other than it's just the universe. Is like, this is where we need you right now. And yeah, it's just incredible. Like just the journey to get from there to here, to go from taking something that I was incredibly passionate about and just lopping it off and trying to forget about it, to now like this is all I want to do. Is
yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, we haven't talked and I love that we haven't talked for a while because is this like you're doing this full time now, right?
It's not full time, just because I have my daughters every other weekend. So like I try not to. I'll maybe do one performance when I have them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to do full time in that situation.
Right.
I have a full time job, but I mean I'm still making. I'm doing really well when I line up the gigs. I do, and now it's season down here in Florida, so
Yeah.
I'm turning gigs down.
That's
It's a good problem to have,
crazy.
but yeah.
Yeah, because when we were working together, you were working your full-time job and you had a weekend gig. And I'm like, man, I know a young guy who he just does gigs and he makes a living doing it. So I kind of like nudged you. I'm like, I think you need to look at that to make the part-time income you were doing
Yeah.
on the weekends.
Yeah,
And
I think when we were
sure
talking,
enough,
I was bouncing at I was a a bouncer at a club,
and you were cleaning boats. I think
and
you were cleaning
then I went
boats.
over and I started cleaning boats and trucks and planes, like just
Yeah.
trying to like get some extra money. And dude, I think one of the funniest things is when I was still married, I had the idea. I was like, hey, because I'd gone to this like I call it therapy camp. It's called On Site outside of Nashville, and it's 7 days. No outside communication. You're not allowed to wear a watch, no phones, nothing.
Mhm.
And while I was there, I kind of rekindled that love for music. And I got home and I told my then wife, I was like, "Hey, like we're always saying that we need extra money." And she was a stay at home mom. It was fine. But I said, "I think that if I went out on the weekends and just busked or played around, I could probably make in a weekend. I could probably make $300 or $400."
Yeah.
And she's like, "You'll never make that much money." And like she just shut that down quick. Like I had already like started building a set list. And she shut that down quick, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And and I allowed that to happen. Like I could have stood up for myself. Like I was a pushover. I know that. And one thing that really kind of started the journey of, I think eventually the divorce was my captain. God love him. I had not started reading No More Mr. Nice Guy yet. I think I started like a day later. But he looks at me and he goes, Jason, he's like, you're so fucking pussy whipped. And I was like, what? And like he was like, sit with that, bruh. He's like, I don't want to hear another word, just sit with it. And I was like, all right. And I remember I got back on the next meeting. I was like, fuck you, man. Because he nailed it. He nailed it on the head. Like, I remember telling my best friend, I was like, I don't want to be married to this woman anymore, but I don't think I can get anyone like that's more beautiful or whatever. You know, like I was so like beat down that I didn't think I had any value. Like I was like, if I lose her, like how will I get anyone else? You know?
Yeah.
And but anyways, it's just been such a great ride and journey so far.
Yeah, dude, it's been so cool to watch you grow. And like I mean, I'm divorced too, and it's been, god damn, it's been a lot of years now. Like it's got to be reaching 14 or 15. And when I was thinking about what are Jason and I going to riff on, and I think there's, like you already shared, there's life after divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can morph a lot. And I've seen a lot of guys really find themselves. And, you know, the fact that you love music, got married, and I call it self-betrayal. I did the same thing. And then you're like, oh shit, I did all these things with this like false idea of trying to keep my wife happy. And then you like get back to yourself post-divorce. It's pretty ironic, you know. Have you seen that? Like you're still in a men's group, right? Have you seen other guys do that?
Yeah, I'm in a men's group locally that I started now, and I don't
Right.
have anyone there that's like going through a divorce yet or anything like that. Like, there's one guy, he went through a divorce years and years ago, but I will say, so my two best friends, like a little while after my divorce, I went back home to Louisiana, and they're like, "Dude, it's so good to have you back." I was like, "Dude, I was just here." He's like, "No." He's like, "You're back."
Yeah.
And I was like, what? He was like, dude, he's like, you're like the fun loving, outgoing guy again. Like you're like, it's amazing what you'll do as a nice guy. I admit, like I was the nice guy. Like I did everything I could. I changed who I was. I became this chameleon to morph and do whatever kept her happy. And I can own the fact that more than likely that never made her happy. She probably would
Perceived
have
happy, yeah.
she probably would have enjoyed it a lot more if I'd have stood up for myself and said, no, this is who I am. And our marriage probably could have been a lot healthier. So I'm not blaming her. I'm taking responsibility for my part in it. And so it's just one of those deals where it was unbelievable. Like I remember my sister-in-law, she had met me one time when I was in high school, and then they went to Germany. They traveled. They were military and all that stuff. They lived in Kentucky, and then they came in. And they, when we were together that Easter, I was sitting there and I had a beer or two, and then she was like, "Anybody else need a beer?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll take another one." So I got another one, and then she's like, "I'm getting a beer." She's like, "I'm getting another beer." Jason, you need another beer? She asked me. She was like, "Jason, you need another beer?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And then a few minutes later, like 30 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes later, she's like, "Jason, you need another beer?" I'm like, "Are you trying to get me drunk?" And she goes, "Damn straight, you're so much fun." She's like, "I've never seen you like this before." And it was, it was after my divorce and everything else, like I was settling back into this person who I should have been all along. But like you said, you sacrifice, you do things that you think are going to be for the betterment of you and your family and your situation. And it's not the case. And it's regrettable for sure. But hey,
So where do you
I'm
think that
found the guy
comes
now.
from? Like if you zoom out and you look at why guys do that, why do you think that is?
I think for me, I can't speak for every guy, but I know for me, if I'd zoom out that 30,000 foot view, my parents went through a divorce. And it was nasty. It was brutal. I never wanted that. I never wanted to do that for myself, but also if I had kids, I didn't want to do that for my kids, to my kids. So I was divorce avoidant, I guess you could say. In that process, I was also raised like, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Like that's how my dad operated. And so you take those two things and you pretty much just become a shill. You're just like, yes, ma'am, let me lay down, let me roll over. And what's crazy is that wasn't until afterwards that I learned new terms like gaslighting and things like these things. Like if I ever brought something up in the relationship, it that I had an issue with, within the hour of arguing about it, even though I brought it up very calmly, it's like, hey, can we talk about this thing you did? Within the hour, by the end of that, it was my fault. I was the horrible person. And then I would just accept that just to shut it down. It's
Yeah.
things like that, because it was easier to do that than to continue to push, continue to push, continue to push. Because I wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want my kids hearing us yell. I wanted us to, whatever you may call it. And I think it's just this avoidance of that pain, but you allow yourself to experience these little deaths and these little pieces of pain along the way, not knowing that ultimately you're truly killing yourself. You think that you're saving the marriage or you're saving this relationship, but really and truly you're killing yourself. And more than likely you're adding to the other person's death as well. And it's just this vicious cycle, this loop that we get stuck in, especially as nice guys, because when they do give us affection, we're like, oh, it's fixed, it's better. And then when they don't, it's like, oh man. And it's just this vicious, this oscillating back and forth that's just brutal.
Yeah. Been there, done that, man. My marriage is very similar. And I don't know if, this resonates with you, but I just didn't know any different. I'm like, this is what we do. Like you said, your dad's like, if mama ain't happy, nobody happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is like the polar opposite of how we make a romantic relationship work. But we're not taught that. Our dads didn't know. Their dads didn't know. And I don't know. I think you could probably agree with this. The world is so different than when our dads grew up or our grandparents grew up. And there's these extra stresses that they didn't have, through our access to the whole fucking world through your phone or other people that they wouldn't have access to otherwise, or we wouldn't have access to. And I believe it's just distracting, like we would, our nervous systems just can't handle it. It's just too much.
Yeah.
I guess one of the factors anyway going on. What, dude, you've shared so much, and I'm like, I didn't want to interrupt you because it was such a good share. What do you think your dad or your religious beliefs like showed you as far as relationships?
So what's funny is the relationship with my dad and my religious beliefs have changed so much just in the last like 5 years since meditating, since men's work, and we can get to that. But the way it was before was, I watched my dad go through a divorce with my mom, and I knew about his divorce from his first wife, and then I saw like how he became dependent on my stepmom, and like if he went through a divorce with her, he'd lose everything. Like everything was in her name, everything was this, all these things. And I was just like, wow, I remember him losing so much when my mom left and all this kind of stuff. And I remember the trouble it caused my mom. And I was just like, I don't ever want to go through that. That looks so incredibly painful. Like as a 7 or as like an 8 or 9-year-old kid watching this happen, only ever seeing my dad cry once before. And it was because of a fight between my mom and him. And now seeing him like weeping and all this stuff through this divorce process. Like I was like, I don't ever want to go through that. Like that. We're not like, again, back then I'm a man. Men aren't supposed to cry. Like if my dad's crying, this is bad. Like my dad fell through an airplane hangar when I was like 6 or 6.5. And I remember him coming home and like, he never cried. He just like, he would wince because he was in so much pain, but he didn't cry. And I didn't understand that. And I was like, what? But then now my mom's making him cry. Like, whoa. And I didn't take that as women are bad. I just took that as like, I don't want to be in that situation. And so with the Christian upbringing, it was keep the peace, be a peacemaker. And so when me as a giver, as a peacemaker, as someone who is conflict avoidant meets a narcissist that like just it's me all the time, well, that's like a perfect combination, And it's like there was no way that I was like even that, like my daughters asked, they're like, Dad, why is Mom mad at you all the time and you're not mad at her? And I was like, I'm thankful. I'm so thankful that she left. I wish she'd have done it different, but I'm thankful that she left because in that process, I don't wish her any ill will. Like she's already remarried. Like they've got their life. Like I wish them the best. Like for me, like it allowed me to find myself again, to truly step back into who I am and learn how to set better boundaries. Because I've been in a couple relationships since then, just dating relationships, nothing too serious. But there were some, like there was one girl we've talked about that I was very serious about, and she had lifestyle choices that she wanted to make and she wanted me to make with her. And I said, I can't follow you there. And as much as I care for you and I do love you, like this is where we must end this. And we're still friends, but we can't do anything more because of the choice. Like, so I have my boundaries now, where before I'd have been like, I mean, I guess if it keeps you happy, like it's stuff like
Well,
that.
dude, you danced with that. You danced with that situation.
Yeah. It was
Because those
definitely a tricky one.
well, those tendencies are there, right? Like those, we're kind of talking at broad strokes and not really getting to the wounding as to why men do that, which is fine. But like I believe, and in my journey, all my stuff that had me as a nice guy and a people pleaser, it didn't go anywhere. Like I've just started I'm in a relationship that's so healthy, but those things keep popping up.
Oh yeah.
And I have to like go, oh, damn, I have that tendency is showing up. Okay, what do I do with this tendency now? I don't have to act on that like impulse.
Yeah.
But that took time to do. But
it's just I think it's just like with anything else. Like you're a nice guy, you're always going to be a nice guy.
yeah,
Like unless you just become you pendulum away and become just a dick. Like you're always gonna have those tendencies. That's always gonna come up. Like, but the thing is you have to become aware of the fact that you're a nice guy and keep that awareness,
yes,
hold that awareness, and then that way when those things pop up, you may not catch them immediately, but you're like, oh, I'm doing it again, and that's
yeah,
when you get to make the choice. That's the difference. That's where you become able to make a choice, and that's with anything, any sort of like mental health or striving or spiritual inflect anything as you're growing. When you get to the place where you recognize that you have a choice, that's when you've made it. People think, no, it's got to go away completely. No, you've made it when you recognize that you have a choice and then you know which one to choose. When
yeah,
you
dude.
turn the autopilot off.
We should just end it there, because that if guys take away that from this, that's great, because I agree with you 100%. But you also said pendulum, and I've experienced that. Like for me, I went nice guy and I went a little too far over here and became a little, I'll just fucking own it. I became a little toxic as I was trying to figure out the balance. And now that I feel I've found closer to balance, you're right. It still comes up. And then I like, oh, I have a choice to override this impulse or this thought or this feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's the power. Like that's actually what it means to be a healthy man. It's like, oh, damn, I don't have to follow this and insert whatever it is, this dark sexual fantasy, this like impulse to yell at my kids, this, you name it, you get a choice on how you behave.
Yeah. Like you said, impulse to yell at my kids. Sometimes my kids, they get so mad at me, but I'll be getting worked up and I'll just stop and I'll start laughing. And they're like, well, what are you laughing about? I'm like, because in my head right now, I'm recognizing just how ridiculous it is that I'm arguing with you, that I'm wanting to raise my voice. I love you. You're wrong. Like in this moment, you're wrong. But I have to I'm choosing to disengage from this dance.
Yeah.
And I'm hopefully in that teaching them. But it's the same thing. So I mean, as men go through men's work, and I know you've kind of been a part of this, one of the big things that I latched onto for a while was the king, warrior, lover, magician, right? The people think, I think that a lot of times people think, well, I have to be in one of those. No, the thing is you flow in and out of those. And once you become aware of that, then you can choose. And I think the way I view it is our ultimate goal is to live in that king energy, right? To be just, to be fair, to be powerful, to know who we are. But what happens is we oscillate and we just pendulum back and forth between all these others. And it's once we become aware, then we can, when we catch ourselves in this pendulum, we can consciously step out of it, step back to the middle. When we're over here, we can consciously step. That is what makes you the king, not living in that quote unquote king energy all the time. What makes you that king is being able to consciously step away from the toxic, to to like the overbearing or the weakling, like to make the choice yourself to say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to respond, react, or live in this place. I'm going to step back into here, which is who I know I am and who I know I want to be. And that's how you continue to strive and you become more and more and more like the wise king. I think that's the only way you can go. It's not chance. You have to be able to like recognize it for yourself.
I just read this book by Dan Baker that blew my mind, his perception on how we operate as humans. And he says that you have to use spirit and intellect to overcome your reptilian brain. And I just freaking love that because it's just a different take on what you're saying. It's like we can choose how we can choose everything. But how I relate it to what you just said is behavior. Because it's true. And when you like start to connect with who you really are, strip away the programming, whatever programming that might be, kind of figure out what your values are as a human being and a man. Now you have a North Star. So that, you know, your reptilian brain, which is like flight, flight, or freeze and programming or whatever you want to call it, you're like, oh, damn, that's not who I want to be. I want to be this guy.
Yeah.
You get to choose. And you know what it always makes me think of is that saying, a tiger can't change its stripes. I call bullshit. I mean, there's different ways you could take that, but
Yeah.
I know for me, it was like, even growing up in my 20s and 30s, I'm like, fuck, like there's something off here. I don't know what it is, but something is off. And then in my 40s, I'm really like, oh, damn, okay. All right. I see what's going on here. And you can start to just be who you are. But all that programming I've had and hurt and pain is like a warning bell. It's like, if you stay true to who you are, you're going to get hurt. And I'm like, maybe, but I can handle that hurt. But it hurts more to betray myself.
Yeah. And it's a deeper kind of hurt. Like, you know, those past hurts, they're there. They're there. They're there for you, they're there to teach you. They're there for your benefit, honestly. I think that's why we have memory. Not to relive things in a good way or bad way, but to help guide us for the future. And I think, you know, the whole, you know, a tiger can't change his stripes. You know what? You're right. He can't. You know why? Because it's in his DNA. Your behavior, there is such a thing as nature versus nurture. And there is a difference. Like there are learned behaviors. A tiger didn't learn to have stripes. It's part of who he is. Just like I can't change the way my hair grows in unless I go and physically get it changed. You know, I can change my hair color, but I can't change the actual pattern of my hair because that's in my DNA. But I can change the pattern at which I think because that was taught to me. Anything I was taught, I can change. I did a math problem. I was taught one way to do a math problem in calculus in college. And for some reason, I would do it her way, but then when I would do my homework, it would shift. Something shifted. And I would do it a different way, but I'd get the right answer. And I did it on a test, and she marked it wrong. And I went to her office hours. I said, ma'am, I said, something's not right. I said, this is right. I got the right answer. She's like, oh, you did the work wrong. I was like, how did I do the work wrong if I got the answer right? She's like, show me. And I showed her, and she's like, show me again. And I ended up doing 2 problems right there in her office, the way that I do it. And she looks, she goes, I've never seen it done like this. And I was like, so does that mean I got it right? She was like, yeah, you got it right. So it just goes to show, like, you can learn it one way, but do it a different way if you need to. Like, you will find the way. And that's what I love about, call it ego death or whatever you want to call it. Like, that's when you step away from autopilot. That's when you are no longer in the passenger seat. You move over to the driver's seat of your life and of your choices. And that's, I think, the part that so many men are so afraid of, because they've made all these choices, whether they're living with the consequences or whatever. To a certain age, they hit this wall where they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me I'm responsible for all this?
Yeah.
I don't want to be responsible for all this. Like, they kind of freak out. A lot of men freak out and they push back and they, whoa, 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 whoa. Like this, that's where you get, you know, the midlife crisis. You have an affair, you fuck your secretary, you buy a sports car, whatever it may be, because you're running from those things, right? And it's just funny. Like, if you look up, I think the original Greek for crisis is choice.
Really?
It's yeah. When I was reading through, um, I don't know if it was Robert Bly or Robert Johnson or somebody else, but I remember they said that it meant choice. So we see crisis and we think, oh no, it's a choice. Like it's literally your life presenting you with a choice. Like what are you going to do? And as men, we get so freaked out by that because we've got all these other inputs. Like this is what it means to be a man. We got Hollywood, we got news, we got sports figures, we got all these things. This is what it means. And we've been being a man for 25, 35, 40 years. And now all of a sudden that's being challenged, being pushed. Like, wait a minute. Wait, hold on. And it's so hard to step into that, to willingly step into that. But guess what? If you don't choose to step into it, as painful that may be, it's going to keep coming up. I mean, there are men that are 50, 60, 70 years old that have been reoccurringly facing these same issues all their life, and they try to turn a blind eye to it. And it's crazy to me that it happens. Like, that's why you have men like my dad, 70 years old, his third marriage. He's been married now for, 30 years almost, or right at 30 years, which is incredible. But he wasn't able to stay. If he'd have stayed the same way, if he hadn't gone through his own metamorphosis or dark night or whatever through those times, they wouldn't still be married because he kept making the same choices over and over again and the same decisions, and it would have led to the same results. And that's what people are like, wow, man, why does it always end up like this for me? What's your fault? You're unwilling to let down the veil and see who you really are. You're unwilling to really look yourself in the mirror and recognize the fact that you're in the position that you're in because you made those choices.
Yeah.
You decided to marry this woman that you knew you shouldn't have married. From like the day you were going to propose, you were like, I'm not doing this. I can't marry this woman. And you let somebody talk you into it. Like, that's no one's fault but yours. You can't blame anybody else. You have to start facing those things.
You know, one of on my journey, one of the hardest truths I came up against was the realization nobody was coming to save me.
It
It was
sucks.
all on me. All on me. And I'm like, what? But wait a minute. I don't think I like that.
Yeah.
But you know, one thing in that same vein, I think, you know, men's groups, as we know, are so powerful. And it's not that anybody's there to do anything for you. It's there to support you, right? And there's a huge difference between do it for you and support you, or, you know, show you your blind spots. Nobody should, well, I would argue there's times somebody should tell you what to do because you just don't know what you don't know. But also, I think it was in the same book I was referring to from Dan Baker. No, sorry. It is from Joe Dispenza's teachings that I'm really, really interested in right now, is that in order to like be a healthy human being, regardless of man or woman, you have to have some kind of belief in a higher power. You get to choose what the higher power is. And I've really sat with that the last few weeks because I agree. Because yeah, you got to do it on your own, but knowing that, you know, if God works for you, that there's a higher intelligence out there. I know for me, it's really helped just process everything. It's like, yeah, I got to do it on my own, but I have this connection with God or the universe or higher intelligence that I just needed to learn how to access. Like that's it for me on my journey.
Yeah,
and that's very like dumbed down. That's very like super vanilla way to explain it, but it's been massive.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love men groups so much. Like you're on your own, but you're not alone. So it's, yeah, they're going to hold that mirror up for you. But at the same time, their arms are going to be wrapped around you and they're going to be holding you up. Like that's what I loved about men's group. That's what I love about the higher power. Like for me through this deconstruction, like it took a lot because I was like, man, what do I even think of God? Who was God? Who was Jesus? And then it boiled down to me as like, do I even believe in this deity as this person as a deity, you know, whatever. And so walking through that was very hard, especially because I used to be a pastor. I was a youth pastor. I was a preacher. I would travel to churches and preach. Like to go from that to this, it's like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And it's always been there. Like, it's just like this nagging feeling, even if it wasn't God, like there's got to be something more. And for me personally, I do think that there is God, but it's just like there's always got to be something. I think honestly those terms are interchangeable. Where you call it God, universe, whatever. I think it's pretty much the same thing. It's just how we
Yeah.
decide to look at it. But you want to know that someone is in your corner, that someone really and truly does have the best for you in mind. And are we able to get out of our own way to experience that? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I grew up in a very religious setting too, different than yours. And that idea of like it is imperative. I really now believe that you need to have some connection to the universe or God in order for you to be like, yeah, I got this. Because if you truly, like I did say, nobody's coming to rescue me, but it's because I had access to this like higher air quotes, higher knowledge all along. I had it all along. It was just a choice to turn towards it and access it. So whether that be God, whether that be, you name it, I really now see how, that's how you get through this. And there's lots of like scientific studies on why people who have a faith do better mentally, emotionally, all these things. So it's super interesting angle that I've not really spoken about yet because I'm still trying to deconstruct it for myself. But I got a question for you about your dad crying. Because it really is a question I have for a lot of guests is like, what was the memory of your dad crying? Do you have one? And you shared it, but what after that? Like, you were pretty young when it happened. Did it like concern you? Did it like, did you question why is dad crying? Did you question,
Like,
that's not normal. Why is a man crying?
Yeah, I question like why is dad crying? And I realized pretty quickly thereafter, because like he was like get in the car, and he had a bag of his stuff and some of my stuff, and we left and went to my grandmother's and left my mom and my brother and sister, and I was like, oh, something with mama, like I recognized like there was, but I didn't understand fully like what that meant, what kind of emotional turmoil he must have been going through to be experiencing that. And then the flip side of that for me was like I was just a super emotional kid. Like I cried at Where the Red Fern Grows every time. I cried at Old Yeller. I cried at The Lion King. Like I've always been like very okay with that. Like I'm not in public. I hated it, but it was always like I just always had a big heart. Like my dad was like, "Man, you got the biggest heart, kid," and I felt that as a weakness too. Like I was like, man, because like when I was in public, when I was around people, like I remember I lost what was one of my best friends because we had a mentally handicapped kid in our class, and I admit I'd pick on him sometimes too. Like it was just kind of the thing. We'd all pick around and we'd pick on him. And one day it dawned on me, I was like, man, like because we got older and he stayed, like he grew with us, but mentally he stayed where we were in like the 6th grade. And I remember I was in my junior year of high school, sophomore or junior year. And me and this other guy, with this one guy, we were really good friends. And he was picking on me, throwing shit at. And I was just like, dude, you got to stop. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, we're picking on him. We're getting a laugh out of somebody who doesn't even know what the hell we're doing. Like, he doesn't understand what we're doing. And we're using that to our advantage. I was like, man, we can't do that. And I don't know what prompted me to say that, but I did. And me and him got into a fight. And then we weren't friends anymore. Like, now we're like Facebook friends, like you do with all high school people. But it was just like, I don't know. I always just felt like I could just feel. Now, as I get older and I get more into this, I learn there's actual terms for that, like empath and empathy and all these things. And I don't know, like it's just always been who I am. And so crying in public has been hard, but crying has never really been like necessarily a hard thing. But it's just an emotion to me now. Like it's something that I'm grateful for.
But you bring up something really interesting, because I know for a fact there's guys that are more air quotes emotional, but it's so not masculine. So we've been told. right? So we've been told. So what do we tell guys? Because I'm in the same boat, dude. Like I'll be in the coffee shop, working on something, and I'll cry. Like I'm not like bawling my eyes out, but I'll cry. I don't give a fuck anymore.
Yeah.
But I used to worry what people would think of me. So what do we say to the countless men out there that are in the same boat?
I think it's funny, man. Like, okay, so let me describe someone to you, and you tell me if this person's masculine or a sissy. Rode bulls, like rode bulls, would rope cows, worked on ranches, would rope and like palpate where you stick your arm this far up a cow's butt, would brand, would castrate steers. That was like enjoyment to them. Played rugby, was a boxer, and is like currently a pretty damn good and successful country singer. Now, does that person sound like somebody who's weak and emotional and effeminate, or does that sound like somebody who's like probably super macho?
Yeah.
All right, that's me. Like those are the thing. Like people think like, oh, they see one little glimpse of your life where you're crying or you're teared up, and they want to immediately pass judgment on you as a man because you're a man. But do they stop and they look at all these other things? Do they look at the fact that me being as emotional as I am, that I have a daughter that would rather, that's 12 years old, that's going through really hard time, that would rather talk to me than to her mother?
Yeah.
But yet I can, at the same time, I can go out there and I can wow a crowd and be Mr. Macho, Mr. Country Music, but I can come home and I can be available to my daughter. Is that weakness? Is that weakness, or is that strength?
Dude, I believe men that approach their emotions and show them are the most courageous men out there. Like even the crying in the coffee shop thing. I'm not saying like, hey, look at me, but that I had to work through some shit to be okay with that. I'm like, I don't give a fuck what you think. And that took an amount of courage to face that. But I know for a fact there's so many guys ashamed that these things come up for them.
It's not shame. It's fear. If there's shame, it's because someone told them it was shameful, but that person told them that because it was fear. They were afraid of those emotions. They were afraid of facing those emotions, of feeling those, of what they would do to them. Because guess what? What are the most acceptable emotions for men?
Anger,
laughter, happiness, and anger.
That's so
anger. When did we say that was okay? When did we say that was expected and 100% normal for a guy to, oh, it's okay, he's just angry? What?
Yeah.
If you think any of those guys stop and say, okay, I'm really angry right now, but what's under that anger? What's fueling that anger? No, they don't, because they're afraid to go that much deeper. It's like this like pre-programmed, like I'm feeling all of these emotions that I don't want to feel, so I'm just going to get angry. And it's that fear of really facing and digging down into what that is, what's driving that is why it's now shameful to be emotional. But like they would have so much more full and rounded lives if they took the time. And yeah, you know what? I guarantee, I can promise you, for the first 6 months to a year of you doing that intentionally, it's going to suck. It's going to hurt. It's going to suck. You will have moments where you will feel a little more feminine. You'll be like, I can't stop crying. Why? I can't stop crying. Because things are being unlocked and released from inside you. When you start doing up here, things from in here start to become released. You know, like Vanderkalt, the body keeps a score. It's true. And once you allow your body to process and to release things, you will at random. You'll be driving down the road and hear a song that maybe you haven't heard in 20 years, or it's a brand new song, and you'll just be like, oh God, what's going on? But it's like, it's your body is truly processing those things if you give it the freedom to do that and to not be afraid of that processing.
And here's the crazy shit. On the other side of processing that stuff is a calmness and a stillness and the ability to navigate these emotions that, dude, I still can't put it into words. Like the stuff that's happened to me in even the last 12 months and how I've navigated it, I'm like, how can I do this right now? Like, I don't get it. But I attest it to what you said. I had a rough, yeah. Some I question my capacity to do life. I really did, because all these emotions were coming out. But after that process, it's like, damn, it's like peaceful over here. It's not only peaceful, it's like that anger you talk about. It's not that it's not there, but I'm aware, oh, this is about something else. It's totally about something else. Let me just like sit with this and figure this out so that I don't want to offload on my kids. That's like as you know, being a father, it really changes your perspective. And I didn't want to repeat the patterns, but I was for the first, like, I don't know how many years. I was like, oh, damn, I'm doing all the same shit I said I wasn't going to do. And that was a big motivator for me personally. And I just didn't like my life. Or how I was feeling inside. Let's put it that way. My life objectively was not that bad. It's just like, why do I feel? Because I had a heart attack, and that was all that unprocessed shit manifesting in my body because I didn't know what to do with it. It's so messed up.
Yeah. I think it's funny because I know on top of fear and shame is the fear of judgment, especially from other men, and then feeling like you are weak in front of women, right?
Mm-hmm.
The crazy thing is the women that you want to spend the rest of your life with that are maybe slightly more mature, they actually find that incredibly attractive. Incredibly attractive. Like the girl that I dated for a long time, the first time I brought her over, I have on my wall, I have a feelings wheel. And she told me later, she was like, I knew this was something special. When I walked in, I saw you had a feelings wheel on your wall.
Yeah.
A feelings chart or whatever, feelings wheel chart. Yeah, because like I use that with my daughters too. I'm like, okay. And I use it for myself. I'm like, okay, there's something more going on here. Like I can feel it. I can't pinpoint it, but to just stop and slow myself down to ask myself questions like, what's under this? What's under this? What's under this? And peel back those layers. Excuse me. Is incredibly helpful. It's helpful, one, in processing that. It's helpful, two, if I process it properly, then I'm not spilling over on them. What happens if you fill a battery up too much? It's going to spill over. It may not look like it now. Like if you look at most things, like especially on vehicles and stuff, it has a fill line. Here's the cap. The fill line's usually down here somewhere, right? Well, they know that once that thing gets going, those levels will rise. If you fill that all the way up to here and that thing gets going, it's just going to start spewing and blowing everywhere. Well, what this work does is it keeps us down here at the level we're supposed to be, not up here, so that we have that room to regulate ourselves. Most guys operate right here the whole time, and they have no room for regulation. And the point is, like, this is a version or a form of self-regulating of your emotions, of your energies, of all these things. And yes, it's scary, but it's totally worth it, because then if you dig into it and you face these things, you're not blowing up at your kids for no apparent reason. You're not blowing up at your partner, your spouse, your dad, your mom, whoever, your coworkers, because you've got that buffer zone where you can, before it starts spilling over, you can say, wait, there's something going on here. And if you learn these tools and you learn how to like navigate that, then when it's in that buffer zone, you can say, okay, I need to dig into this. You can stop yourself, and whatever your method may be, meditation, journaling, talking to a friend, whatever that may be that you've learned to use, that's where that comes in. That's where it's invaluable. But most guys don't, because they're afraid of what they'd rather be judged for getting angry than for crying. Like, you know how backwards that shit is?
Yeah, I do. But it's been the anger part's been normalized.
It has. And that's, that's since World War II.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution did that.
Yeah, I know. I get into that. And that's so a generation is 30 years by definition. So we're talking like we're 3 generations removed from that. Like it's time.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to evolve. And women have evolved immensely in that space, and the majority of men are just stuck with that. Their grandfathers taught their fathers that way of being. It doesn't work, guys. It doesn't work. You're getting left behind. You're simply getting, and it's not like a shaming thing. It's just like, I get it, and go find the proper help.
Yeah, the thing that gets me is they're like, well, I don't have time to just sit around and feel my emotions. I got to get shit done. You think you can't get shit done? Like, you think all you do, like, I think what they see is they see like this almost cartoonish or characterized version of themselves being, and this is no insult or slam to women in the audience or anything like that, but like women can get, and they're pros at this. They can get together and they can share with one another and they can emote with one another and they can feel with one another, and then they can walk away from it and they feel like that's handled and that's dealt with and it's glorious. But all the men think is, what, I'm just going to sit around and cackle to a bunch of other dudes? No, that's not it at all. Like it would be great if you could learn that ability, but it's the processing of it. Like we don't know how to
Yeah.
process through opening up to others. We don't know that
No.
vulnerability. We don't have that skill because it's been like trapped and like denied from us for so long. Because yeah, guess what? When you went to the plants and you had to work for someone else, you didn't have time to break down. You didn't have time to really feel. You were there to do a job. You were a robot. They conditioned you to become a robot
Yeah.
from 7 to 9, 7 to 6, or whatever your work hours were. That was the conditioning of it. When you work for yourself, like as you used to back in the day before the Industrial Revolution,
Farming or whatever. Yeah.
you could take a break if you need to feel something, or if your wife needed you for something, you could take a break. You could do those things, but now you can't. And
Yeah.
it's just like it's become, and now you've got the pendulum. You've got the guys who go all the way over here and they are just hyper emotional. And yes, they will allow their emotions to dictate their entire mood, their entire day, their whatever. And you got the guys over here that are closed off, that are just like, no, I'm here to do a job. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And
Yeah.
they're judging these guys, and these guys are judging these guys. And it's creating this bitterness back and forth, when what we want to find are these guys that are right here in the middle that say, you know
Totally.
what, like my emotions are important. They do affect me. I can acknowledge that. They don't have to control me. I know that I need to get work done. There's a lot of shit that needs to happen right now. And so, you know what? Yeah, I have this emotion. I can recognize it. I can own it. And I know that I can deal with it when I finish this task. Because there is the ability to go back and forth. You know, I got this "and" tattooed on my hand is
Oh,
because
cool.
you have the ability to experience two emotions at one time.
Yes,
It's
you
not
do.
I love you, but it's I love you, and it's I'm frustrated and I need to get this work done. I'm really sad and I need to get this work done. Because you can hold tension inside of you for both of those things and still manage to get both of those things done. That's a
Yeah.
superpower that you have that you just need to tap into and realize.
It's no different than, somebody who wants to become a surgeon. Like there's work to do to learn. There's a skill set to learn to be able to become a surgeon. This is no different. This is just skills. It's not, oh, I can't do that. It's just you haven't been shown how to do that. It's very, very different. And yeah, I mean, you've referred a couple times to the pendulum, and I agree with you fully. Like it's all about balance. If you're a highly emotional man, that's cool. You need to figure out some regulation. If you're like locked down and you don't show emotion, you need to do some work to like tap into that, because it's going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. I wish I was joking about that, or it was an exaggeration, but it's not. It's just not an exaggeration.
It's I just want to say this.
Yeah.
What's really cool about doing the work yourself is how it affects those around you, right?
Yeah.
Like they're either going to step up or they're going to step out.
Yeah.
And so like you got to recognize that. And so my ex-wife, she decided to step out. She didn't want to match. Like she tried it. I can't fault her. She really tried. Somewhere in there, she stopped. She decided to reach out to another man for her emotional support that she felt like she couldn't get from me, and she did her thing. That's great. That's the journey that she's on. My dad, I sat down with I called my dad and I said, hey, I said, I just need you to know, like when I call you, I want a relationship with you. I'm not calling you for advice. I'm not calling you for you to judge my actions or my choices in life as a man or as a father. I need you to see me as a man. And if this is going to continue, it's going to become more of a friendship than a father-son relationship.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you can't handle that, that's okay. We just won't talk as much. And I'll just call you and say, hey, I love you, Dad. I said, but if you want something like this is what I need, and this is what it's going to take. And it took a little while. Like I'd call him like, hey, how's it going? I was like, oh, good. He's like, what you doing? I'm like, I say something. He's like, well, what you need to do? And I say, hey, stop. It's not what I call. And now, and this is 4 years ago, probably 5, that we started doing this, talking to each other like this. Now he's one of my best friends. And he'll just come and like, hey, what you doing? Oh, I'm doing this. He's like, oh man, let me tell you what just happened. And I'm like, we'll just talk.
Cool.
And like right now he's battling prostate cancer. Like he just found out it's bigger than they thought, but they think it's contained. And like, we'll just have open and candid conversations about it. I'm like, hey, how you feeling? He's like, well, I'm scared. I know.
Yeah. That's
And like
amazing.
walking through, like my sister passing, like that's a hard subject for him. Like, can we talk about it? And he tears up and he's like, son, I gotta go. And
Yeah.
it's hard because he's afraid to really allow himself to feel that, because he feels a lot of shame. There's a lot that happened before she passed. There's a lot of animosity between the two of them. They didn't talk for a while. And for him to open up about that is really hard. And I think I probably get him closer than anybody else, because we'll talk and we'll have good conversations, and then it hits a wall and he's like, I gotta go. And I know why. But it's simply the fact that, like, as I've done the work, it spills over. And he told me yesterday, he's like, son, he said, I'm proud of you. He said, the way that you've handled your divorce and being a dad to those two little girls and chasing after a dream. He's like, I'm so very proud of you. He's like, I know I didn't tell you enough, but I want you to know I am. And these tears are tears of joy. Like, every man wants to hear his dad say, I'm proud of you. Whether his dad was around or not, he wants to hear that from a man that he respects, that's above him, that's lived life before him. And it feels good. And I know that, like, I couldn't have that relationship with him and trust his words if I hadn't laid the boundaries and done the hard work on my end. And like, it's rewarding. This work is so rewarding. Like, if you're willing to dig into it and do the work and the processing and learn how to see your hiccups and your faults and learn how to face them, and you'll just do those checks within yourself and the way it affects those around you, you become so much more full as a person, as a man. Like, yes, I'm divorced and I have 2 kids, and it's a hell of a time sometimes making ends meet. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it. Like, and the next person that comes along, the person that I do commit to this next time around, like, it'll be that much better. Will it last forever? I don't know. I would like for it to, but at the same time, I'm not stupid. Like, we grow and we change and we morph and we do these things. Like, if they're willing to grow and morph with me and I'm willing to grow and morph with them, then yeah, there's a possibility. But it's just a process. It's all a process. Every relationship that you meet is mirroring something back to you, whether it be a coworker or a brother or a sister or a kid. They're showing you parts of you, like, hey, you need to be aware of this. It's not that you need to wrestle it and kill it and destroy it and get it out of your life. It's the fact that God, universe, whoever wants you to just be made aware that, hey, this is a part of you. And it's based on your reactions, it's a part of you that you're not very fond of. Why don't you make peace with it? Why don't you take the time to, like, make peace with it and recognize it and say, I don't have to be afraid of that, but I also don't have to succumb to that anymore. It's just all of these things. It just makes for a beautiful life. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're going to be wealthy and you're going to be famous or you're going to, get all the women or anything. That doesn't mean anything else like that's going to change. What's changing is inside of you. And it's just incredible.
It is incredible, man. And that's how one man can literally change the world. Like, I believe that. You sharing about your dad, the ripple effect of you working on you is healing him, is healing your kids, all these people around you, impacting their life in a new way. And it's fucking beautiful. It's fucking beautiful. That's like what men need to hear. It's like, it's not just about you, but it's also just about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's cliche. Like, you do something for you and you help the people that you want to help the most on a level that you haven't been shown.
Yeah.
And you're doing that, man. You're literally living it. I respect how far you've come and how tapped into yourself you are. I got a closing question for you.
Yeah.
What message do you have for a previous version of yourself?
Oh. The 2 things, it always, anytime I think about this, the things is like, you're worthy and you're enough. Like, those are the things that, like, you're worthy of love. You're enough. Like, you're worthy of being loved. You're worthy of respect. And you're worthy and you're good enough to chase your dream. like for me, like the music thing, like I always compared myself to my brother. And like even after my brother moved away, I'd go and perform. They'd be like, "You did such a great job. How's your brother doing?"
Shit.
So it's like I was always the second fiddle.
Yeah.
And it was just like in this process, it's also like my brother has been like, I love my brother to death, and he's a phenomenal musician. And I don't think that I'm anywhere near as good as him, especially instrumentally. But he was like, Jason, he's like, you've got it. He's like, you've got way more than I had. He's like, you're really good. He's like, you're better than I was. And I was like, wow, like to hear that, like it does something. But it's just when you go through this, you learn that you are enough and that you are worthy without anybody else's input, without anybody else affirming that. Like you just learn, like it just becomes a part of who you are. Like I am enough. I am good enough. And we had those conversations. I mean, right now, I admit I had one of the guys from my brother had passed away at the end of last year, and it brought up a lot. That and my sister passing and just a lot. And I was going through the same time I was going through the breakup with that other person. And man, I went into a depression. Like it's bad. And in the last year, I put on 56 pounds. And I felt like it was finally lining out. And then with the voice thing, I had to go through a series of steroids. It was just like, boop, boop, boop. But I recognize that like I don't look the same as I did. So I still, and it's a process for me. I'm still working on like, I tie a lot of my self-worth into my identity because I grew up with a dad who's like, oh, you're getting, now my dad is 5'9", 300 and something pounds. He's not a looker, but he's the first one to be like, oh, you putting on some weight. And I've lived with that my whole life. And so like, I'm still learning to process that part of myself, like to love that part of myself more. But we talked about this when and even still now, when I'm really feeling confident in who I am and I'm grounded, I'm centered, I can walk into a room and men and women will turn and look. Like they don't even know that somebody just walked into the room, but they feel it and they'll turn. And it's just like, it's because of who you are, who you've prepared yourself to be before walking into that situation. Yeah. I'm not in there being loud. I'm not in there being crazy. I'm just in there being who I am.
Yeah. And that, oh man, there's another hour to talk about just on that, on the effect of that. But I want to be cognizant of your time and the listeners' time. Where can people find you and your music? Because I want to make sure they see your genius.
Yeah, thank you. Right now it's jason.white.music. So that dots are periods. Obviously it's jason.white.music on all social medias. And then hopefully, if I can get some recording done, I'll be on Spotify soon enough.
Awesome.
I got like 16 songs and I'm always writing more. Those are like songs I've written, and I've got some more that I've written with other people. But I'm just, I don't know. It's just crazy how life works out.
You inspire me, Jason. Like I don't know if I've ever said that, but watching what you do with your music has personally inspired me, and I appreciate that.
Oh, so thank you.
Thanks for being here, man. I think people are going to get a ton of value out of this.
Thanks. I hope so, man. And if anyone listening does decide to follow me and they want to message me directly with more questions about this, I'm always happy. I mean, this is like music is a passion, but so is this. Like they're equal with one another. Like I love men's work. I love helping people, men, women, to find that sweet spot of who they are.
Thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Got it, man. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I honestly hope you found something you can use in your life. And I hope you found some relief in knowing that you're not the only one with challenges. We can be very isolated as men. If you don't have support in your life, please reach out to someone. It's okay to need help. It doesn't mean that you're less of a man. In fact, it takes a courageous man to know when it's time to ask for guidance. Until next time, brother.